Now, the lingering effects of COVID-19 continue to be felt in many households. Children from poverty-stricken areas are slowly bearing that brunt. Because of the socio-economic conditions, they do not have their early childhood developmental needs properly met in the home. These include nutritious food as well as stimulation. Let's discuss this further now, and we're joined by Extraordinary Associate Professor of Education at Stellenbosch University, Professor Eric Atmore. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Professor. Maybe just paint a picture for us in terms of, over the last 2 years, what have been some of the most pressing early childhood developmental needs that have lacked in households across the country?
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. The past 2 years has been devastating on young children, and especially on vulnerable young children. They've missed out on substantial early learning opportunities. They've missed out on a nutritious meal at the Early Childhood Development Center, and they've been left in communities which are less than safe for young children. So it's had an effect, and we are going to see this effect down the line when these children enter primary school.
Professor, what would you say some of the biggest contributors to these issues that you've just highlighted are? Is it a lack of resources in the country? Are we still trying to navigate our way post the pandemic? What would you say is the one thing that is the biggest contributor to what we're seeing at the moment?
For me, the biggest contributor is a lack of political will to meet the needs of young children. You know, we've signed the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. We've got a wonderful constitution that puts young children first. We've got really good policies in place, world-class early childhood policies for young children. The problem is that we haven't got the political will to implement it. If we can just implement what we promised to young children will thrive. But I'm afraid that we've left young children in the lurch, we've abandoned them, and initially the Department of Social Development was missing. They showed very little care for the millions of young children who are in early childhood development centers. In fact, the minister at the time, Minister of Social Development, would not allow early childhood development centers to open. And when the High Court forced her to do that, she took away the early childhood development subsidies. So it really is a lack of care and political will to meet young children's needs.
And I think one of the other important things that we have to zone in on here, Prof, is the fact that you speak about vulnerable children, and these are mostly found in rural or township areas where there is a lack of early childhood development centers in general. And then what you find is that community members will establish illegal establishments that further abuse the child's need for these early childhood development needs that they would have.
Look, across the country there are just under 200,000 entrepreneurial women caring for our children every single day. They've got all the odds stacked against them. They earn shockingly low salaries, way below the national minimum wage. They get very little resource support. The early childhood development subsidy is 17 Rand per qualifying child per day for 264 days. And that is wholly insufficient to cover salaries, to cover nutritious food, and to cover equipment. And to exacerbate the problem, if a family earns more than 3,800 Rand a month, as a single parent, or 7,600 Rand per month as a two-parent income, government assumes that they are too wealthy, too affluent to receive the subsidy. So really all the odds are stacked up against our young children.
What do you think is the immediate action that needs to happen, Prof? Obviously, this is an issue that should be dealt with long term, but surely there are some immediate initiatives that could perhaps alleviate some of the sufferings that our children face in the country.
There are 4 main actions which I think are immediately needed and are relatively easy. Firstly, our president has to take the lead. He has to come out and make a definitive statement, policy statement around early childhood development. Then we need to increase the capacity and the capability of our public officials. Sadly, our public officials are far too few, and they're not competent to deliver on the really good ECD policy that Cabinet approved 7 years ago. Thirdly, National Treasury has to come to the party. They have to provide the funding. If we look at the current funding for early childhood development, less than 1% of the education budget goes to early childhood development. And that's for a cohort of just over 6 million children. If we do these things, these children will thrive. There will be cost savings down the line. We'll have fewer failures, fewer children getting involved in drugs and substance abuse, fewer children getting involved in crime, and we'll have a healthy and vibrant society.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Professor. We really appreciate it. That is Professor Eric Atmore, who is the Extraordinary Associate Professor of Education at Stellenbosch University, speaking about the implications of not giving vulnerable children in the country their basic needs, early childhood development, as we call it here, and of course them having access to those centres so they can get a meal and of course stimulation.